Greetings, people who really like the accordion and accordion-related topics. Now, if you wonder why I make these goofy videos, it's just that I don't want to have lived over 6 decades and not have made a contribution. Contribution with tribute. I want to give tribute to my audience and to people out there and hope that my ideas are useful. I don't want to go to my grave not having given something. I just don't want to do it and know that. But my grandfather and my father were shoemakers, and after my dad moved to Florida when I was 30, his friend, a master shoemaker, a master craftsman, taught me how to be a shoemaker. And he said, if you're doing something you love and it's beneficial for society or beneficial for others, if you love it, he said, never quit. Never quit. You can have a job making big money and be miserable. You got to do what you love. He said, never quit. He said, never quit. Remember 9, the ruler of all numbers? 9, never quit. So when it comes to this, I have to do this. All right. Now, we've been talking about the circle of fifths. I know you're getting tired of it. But there's so much to say. There's just so much to say that I want to get in as much as possible before I move on. And basically what I did a long time ago, I've been working on it for forever, is looked at the traditional circle of fifths. This is just one example, all right? And I thought, what would make this better? What could we do to make this better? Well, we could make it amplified, made greater. And here we have 9 again, amplified, 9, all right? So what I did was I theoretically thought of it as a mandala, right? It's a psychological kind of an Indian religion type tool that's been used by Hindus, Buddhists, etc. And I thought of the circle of fifths as a mandala, and it's a part of something, all right? It's a work in progress, and it just wants to grow, and it wants to become whole. It wants to have a sense of unity. It wants to become whole, like a human being, a human psyche. We start out with nothing, and we grow, and we become what we are. So that's what happened. I thought of this as a mandala, and I thought, let's shoot for completeness, okay? And when I talked about psychology before and the amplified circle of fifths, I talked about a sense of openness and closedness. I don't know if anybody understood that, but I gave this example here. You know, I showed how for hundreds and hundreds of years, way back in the Middle Ages, they referred to this interval, the augmented 4, as the devil in music. Well, I touched on the sense of openness and closedness. Oh, and I forgot to tell you that the subject slice would represent the psychological persona, and the aggregating slice would represent the shadow side. But anyway, the point is, there's a sense of openness and closedness, and it might suggest levels of consciousness. Like here you have a lower level of consciousness. Here's your black hole, all right, and you go out, and then here you go out as far as you can go. I call this the counter major data ring. And what you have here is, it's just like the effect with human beings. In fact, chords show this. Chords. You have an openness here. You're augmented, as open as much as it can go. And you have these kinds of people, open, vulnerable, maybe you might say extroverted. And way down on the other end of the spectrum, you have the closed person. You have your diminished chord. It's as closed, as tight as it can go. And it's not unlike when you're talking to somebody, probably when you're listening to my videos, and somebody's saying something you don't want to hear. Next thing you know, you see this. You see people, they start to close up. Or they go like this, and they reach up, and they'll touch their lips or their nose, they'll fidget, but you see they're closing up. It's psychological. It's a consciousness thing. So you see psychology with chords as a metaphor for the way people behave. Anyway, I wanted to throw that in because I forgot to say that earlier. So with the accordion, all right, because these videos are all accordion related, You've seen this handy chart a million times. You have your counter bass row. It's actually a rank. And you have your bass row. And you have major, minor, seventh, and diminished. Okay? You know that. You've seen this 500 times. And in a similar fashion, all right, in a similar fashion with the amplified circle of fifths, all right, you have your counter major ring, your major ring. Now there's no seventh, okay, that's okay, but you have your minor data ring and your diminished data ring, which also will function as a specifier. That's a sharp and flat indicator. So you have that. So you have that similarity. So today I wanted to look at the useful features of the amplified circle of fifths. Okay? Well, we know the fourths and fifths, all right, are displayed. That's very clear. Anybody should know this, even the beginner. You know, you go this way and you move in fifths. You go this way, you move in fourths. It's the same with the counter major ring. It's the same thing. Fourths, fifths, you know that. I'm sure you've seen this before. You've seen the basic chintzy circle of fifths. That's before I fixed it. All right, then the next feature, a nice feature, is your relative major-minor relationships are established with any of these rings in any given slice. Here's your C major, your relative minor. So if you're working with your relative minor, here's your relative major. And it works on each level of rings here. It's the same thing. Relative minor. Okay, and that would be a major. Because I was too lazy to white out the minor sign here. So you have your F sharp, A relationship, then A to C, C to E flat, etc. So you have your relative major-minor relationships are established. You can determine your key signatures, which I mentioned before, using the diminished data ring. I already showed you that in the video. It's beautiful if you think about it. If you work it out in your mind, it's really nice. You do your offset thing for your sharps. The flats are straightforward. All right? And then you have your diminished and diminished 7 chords are displayed openly in each slice. In this slice here, you have your diminished chord, and you add your outer, your counter major ring, you get your diminished 7 chord. All right, we talked about that. And then I talked about the other feature, the circle shortcut to the blues. Quickly, you figure out your imaginary, my theoretical perfect chord. You determine your perfect chord. Here's your C perfect chord. All right. You combine that with your aggregating minor. This is your subject slice. This is your aggregating slice. So this is your aggregating minor. You take your theoretical perfect chord, add it to your aggregating minor, use idiomatic alternation, which I call the Mississippi meld, and boom, you have your blues scale for any key. It's that simple and that quick. Another feature is a contiguous cell formation, which I showed in a previous video. I showed the single tone contiguous cell chord formation. Let me see if I can find that paper that I showed you. Okay, the single tone version would be these. I'm pretty sure I showed these already. You can look at your amplified circle of fifths, and you can find chords, and you can make chords by using cells that touch each other. They're contiguous, they're touching, they're connected in some fashion, even if they're connected at the corners, okay? So teachers could use that, teach little children chords, by using their handy amplified circle of fifths. You can copy this if you want to. Anyway, okay, so you have that. And then you also have your contiguous cell chords using the single tone and chord method. All right? And that would be, for example, you have your, let's say you have your major data ring, you'd have a C, and above that you have your E flat major chord, and you'd get a C minor 7. I hope I'm speaking correctly. As another example, you have in your major data ring, you'd have your C, then you have your E minor chord, they're touching, contiguous, and you'd have a C major 7, And down here, for example, you'd have, in your minor data ring, you'd have a D minor chord. And then below that would be an E, and they're touching. So you'd have with my chord symbol in my system, that's what all these symbols are. This is my graphic and my alphanumeric, but you'd have a D minor with an added major second, and this would be the linear alphanumeric version, but you would get stuff like this. You can study the circle, and you can find other stuff too. Oh, and there's also non-contiguous cell chords that can be made, which is really nice. Okay, so you have that. And now, this is very important. I'm going as fast as I can. I know I take too long. In this video, my video, Toy Accordion number 7, all right? I tried to show that all you need to do is take some very simple chords, just very simple. This is traditional notation, and this is my chord notation, but they're the same chords, no big thing. And how I tried to show how you take simple chords and you mix them with scales that are already pre-existing, and you can use my chord name or you can use traditional, it doesn't matter. But I tried to show that these scales, all right, will work with these simple chords. Now, we're not going to go there. We already did that. But I'm going to tell you something. In that video, I said, look at this. I said, here's what you can play and it'll work. And I also said, here's what you don't want to play. And in this case, with the C minor tonal center, with the C, I said the A major chord tones will not work. And as a matter of fact, the really neat thing is they won't work with any of the scales that go with that song with the C minor tonal center. And I said to you, I can't explain it, it's too complicated, it's too weird, and I didn't explain it. But maybe now I can quickly do it if I can go fast enough. So if you're familiar with my system, I invented what I call the subject slice and the aggregating slice in your circle of fifths. In other words, here's the full chart. Here's your subject slice, all right? Because we're going to use the tonal center of C. So this would be our subject slice. This is the aggregating slice, the opposite, all right? It's directly across from your subject slice. I talked about that, right? I showed examples. You see, I showed this and we talked about it, all right? Now, if you follow that, if you don't, go back and watch my other videos. If you follow that, you can see that, let's say you want to find out what works. You take your A tonal center, okay, that's in your major data ring. This is the counter major ring, but I didn't put in the tones because it's not necessary for now. We just don't need that right now. Here you have your A tonal center. Now, keeping in mind my system, my idea, my theoretical idea of the perfect chord as seen on the amplified circle of fifths chart, if you take that concept of the perfect chord, you will see that the A perfect chord tones are clearly displayed, all right, clearly. Then you will also see that this A major chord in the major data ring, all right, will work with any of the relative minors of the tones of the perfect chord. In other words, that A major chord will work with the B minor, it'll work with the F sharp minor and the C sharp minor. God, I hope I'm speaking correctly. But you see here then, logically, that the A major will not work with all the remaining relative minor chords. So what I'm saying is, if you get the big chart out all right, let's say you have your A tonal center, all right? You determine your A perfect chord, because it's right there. It's obvious. Then you know, because I've already done the experimentation, then you know that with this A major, you can use the relative minor of E and the relative minor of D, or A's own relative minor, and it'll work just fine. Now, granted, once in a while there's going to be some weird tones that need to be chromatically altered, but that's fine. That's the basic setup. So just quickly, once again, that's the basic idea. All right? So now with what I've just shown you, okay, with what I just showed you, Now you see why this A major does not work with any of these scales that we use for our C minor tone. No, excuse me, our C minor song in our other video. You see, it won't go with any of these. And I just explained why. I just explained it. And this will work with any tonal center. You can figure it out with any tonal center on your chart. Now, okay, the subject minor, right? Let's say we want to start out like with that song I showed. We want to start out with a subject minor. Let's say a C minor tonal center, okay, because that's in your minor data ring. We want to start out with a minor. And you say, well, what works and what doesn't work? Well, all right, this C minor tonal center, all right, that would be your tonic or your root, whatever you want to call it. It'll work with its relative major. We know that. That's a very traditional concept. And now with my chart, the amplified circle of fifths, it'll also work with your A diminished chord. This C minor will work with your A diminished chord. All right? It'll work with your aggregating perfect chord over here. This C minor will work with your, this is the aggregating, okay? Here's your subject slice, all right? And here's your aggregating. So this is your aggregating major, then here's your aggregating perfect chord. And as we know from previous videos, this C minor will work with your aggregating perfect chord, and if you use the idiomatic alternation, the Mississippi meld that I taught, you will get a blues scale. You will get a blues scale, and I already did a video on that, so you can refer to those videos. But it works with any tonal center here. All right? You can review that in the other videos, but this minor will work with this aggregating perfect chord if you use idiomatic alteration. And the relative, this C minor, all right, will work with the relative majors, that's these, of any participating tricell group. In other words, do you see this C minor here? Well, that's part of this tricell group here. See this? 1, 2, 3? So that means this C minor will work with any of these chords here. All right? Now let's say you have a tricell group of G, C, and F. All right? That's C, your C minor is a participating chord in this tricell group. So that means it'll work with these relative major chords. Now you see your C minor again is part of this tricell group here. 3. All right? So that tells you that this chord will work with these relative major chords. All right, once again, this minor chord, this tonal center that you've chosen to write your song, if it's part of a 3-tone group, whether it be these 3, or these 3, or these 3, will work with the relative major of the minor chords in any of those groups, respective groups. You have to think it through. I know that sounds a little weird. And what will not work? As I demonstrated clearly, what will not work is, now we're back to the beginning. The C minor will not work with the aggregating major. Remember, it worked with your aggregating perfect chord, but it will not work with your aggregating major chord alone. It won't work. And that is why I showed this specific example, because this C minor tonal center for this whole song will not work. This C minor tonal center will not work with this aggregating major chord. And now you see why I couldn't explain it last time. It's just too rich. It's just too much. Okay, quickly, I'm trying to go as fast as I can. So just briefly here, quickly, if you have your, here's an example. Here's your C minor, and it's part of this tricell group. It's part of this 3 tricell group, and it's part of this tricell group, okay? Then here's your relative majors for that, and this C minor will work with any of these relative majors, okay? You see that there? And here's your theoretical A perfect chord, all right? And the C minor will work with that if you use idiomatic alternation, and it makes the blues scale. So I want to show you that big. I blew that up. Okay, that's the best I could do. I know it took too long. I'm sorry. So maybe we can move on to another topic, or maybe put the accordion back on. So thanks for being incredibly patient, and I hope I have presented something of value. Good night.